You remember this? So back in 2016, when Donald Trump was first running, getting into politics, he was on the debate stage on the Republican campaign. Donald Trump told Jeb Bush his brother lied us into the Iraq War. The best part of Trump is that he's a repudiation of Bush and Clinton. He should not adopt their failed foreign policy. War with Iran will be far greater disaster than an Iraq war. So Donald Trump, this is what I gave credit for back in the day, and people started to speculate that maybe this guy was a bit of an anti-interventionist, that this guy was a bit anti-war, and that's what gave him a lot of grounding. That's what gave him a lot of popularity and respect in the political world, because it was the first time, especially someone on a Republican stage, that they were speaking out against the wars and calling directly out to Jeb Bush, who the Bush family was responsible for the illegal invasion of Iraq and getting us into Afghanistan. And then Barack Obama got us into 7 more wars, turned 2 wars into 7. And none of these people got prosecuted. None of these people got held to contempt. And we thought maybe there's something with Donald Trump. Maybe that's why the establishment hates him so much, because maybe he's going to end the wars, or at least look into him. This is just last year. This was just at his campaign in Madison Square Garden, where he announced, "I will end the war in Ukraine. I will stop the chaos in the Middle East. I will prevent World War III from happening." People adored that. People loved that. People were cheering for that. They came in mass droves to support this guy and to elect him as president, because people thought, and Donald Trump seemed to be determined to end the Ukraine war. People enjoyed that. Well, things started to go a bit downhill, though, because Glenn Greenwald points out, at an event organized by Trump Israeli American mega donor Miriam Adelson, that's Sheldon Adelson's wife, who Trump himself said at the White House more than anyone, always wanting more for Israel from him and always getting it. Trump vowed to make Israel great again if he won. So this was kind of the red flag. This is a major red flag that Donald Trump, make America great again, the guy who was supposed to end the wars, now just got a huge fat paycheck by the mega donor and APEC that is responsible for initiating wars and initiating a genocide. So this is kind of the big warning shot for people to realize that Trump isn't exactly the anti-war candidate you were thought to believe. And ladies and gentlemen, the saying goes that sometimes when you think things are going to change, they tend to remain the same. So Donald Trump, just recently, let no one be fooled. The hundreds of attacks being made by Houthi, that's the Iranian group, the sinister mobsters and thugs based in Yemen who are hated by the Yemeni people, all emanate from and are created by Iran. Any further attack or retaliation by the Houthis will be met by great force, and there is no guarantee that the force will stop there. Iran has played the innocent victim of rogue terrorists, which they've lost control, but they haven't lost control. They're dictating every move, giving them weapons, supplying them with money and highly sophisticated military equipment, and even so-called intelligence. As compared to us. That, subsequently created the Mujahideen, which became Al-Qaeda and ISIS. How we're giving Israel more tools of destruction to continue a genocide. How we constantly give weapons to Saudi Arabia. So we purge more countries with warfare. As opposed to us. We're the biggest terrorist exporters in the land. The United States. Just don't forget that. All the times that they want to scare you about all these other Middle Eastern countries and all these terrorist groups come from, you take the time. You take the time to look where the money comes from, who's giving them weapons, who's giving them intelligence, points right back to the United States. The United States or Israel. The two countries that will never be held responsible for war crimes. Funny. Every shot fired by the Houthis will be looked upon from this point forward as being a shot fired from the weapons and leadership of Iran. And Iran will be held responsible and suffer the consequences. And those consequences will be dire. So this is Donald Trump announcing that he's going to do full-scale warfare in Yemen. Donald Trump, who just said he's going to try and end the war, stop World War III from coming, is going to ramp up more wars. A guy that people came in mass droves to support and endorse this guy and elect him president, hoping that he was going to cut back on the warfare, is advancing more warfare. Which, by the way, he's increasing the Pentagon for it. So all those Doge cuts, all the millions and millions of dollars that they try to find with Doge, it wasn't going to you. All those cutbacks never meant anything other than giving more to the Pentagon. So you're losing your Social Security, you're losing your Medicare, you're losing your Consumer Protection Bureau, all towards the Pentagon, all towards the war machine. A guy who was supposed to cut back on the wars because he doesn't want to see any more dead bodies. I don't want more dead bodies. What do you think is going to happen with this? Do you think it's going to be sunshines and rainbows? Donald Trump announcing full-scale warfare. So here's antiwar.com pointing out major U.S. attacks in northern Yemen as Trump vows overwhelming lethal force, 24 killed. So it's already happening. It's already happening. So him announcing this, it's not, oh, we're going to start initiating war. No, it's already happening. 24 have been killed. The President of the United States initialized warfare in Yemen without Congress approval, which is unconstitutional, which is illegal, which they could actually impeach him for on this. But they won't. They will never touch this. Why? Because the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, your whole entire White House, all these politicians are brought to you by the war machine, brought to you by Israel. They're advancing this. They're cheerleading this. They're saying this, how great this is. These bloodthirsty freaking monsters that had seized control of your democracy. They're applauding for more war. A war that nobody wanted. Trump threatened to hold Iran responsible for anything the Houthis do. So U.S. airstrikes are reportedly hitting the Yemeni capital city of Sana'a today, with President Trump promising overwhelming lethal force against the Houthi movement in northern Yemen unless they stop all attacks on international shipping. Early casualty figures indicate a lot of the civilians have been killed or wounded. The most recent figures from Al Mayadeen were at least 24 killed and many more wounded. 10 civilians were killed in Sana'a alone. Trump said that he had decided to launch decisive and powerful military action against the Houthi terrorists. Why? Because that's what Israel wants. Israel, who bought out Trump, who bought the Trump campaign and ushered in and allowed him to become president, is now doing their warfare bids. So, instead of, bitching and complaining and threatening to, take over Canada or take over Greenland and take their sovereignty, maybe you should look in the mirror. Maybe you should look in the mirror and decide who exactly is running your country. Maybe figure out your sovereignty before you start threatening other people's. Just say. Maybe realize that an entire foreign lobby firm, the only foreign lobby firm that's allowed to operate in America, bought out your politicians to advance warfare. Just saying. Accusing them of piracy against Americans, he also condemned former President Joe Biden for being pathetically weak and saying no American commercial ship had gone through the Suez Canal in over a year. So, just like every other war, just like every other military occupation or any other attack, it always leads down to business. There's always some sort of economical capital gain to get from more warfare. In this case, it's getting control of the Suez Canal. In this case, it's to get cargo ships through that area because the United States, when they want something, especially when it costs business and costs capitalization off the death and disparity of others, they're going to seize the opportunity for it. And now they're advancing it because Israel wants this war. Like many of the important U.S. declarations of war these days, President Trump's announcement came via a post on social media application Truth Social and was punctuated with all caps screaming rails about hell raining down in Yemen like nothing you've ever seen before. Trump also notably took time from announcing attacks on the Houthis to threaten Iran in a post, insisting that if Iran continues to support the Houthis and the Houthis do anything to threaten Trump, who has received one of the largest mandates in presidential history, the mandate to stop wars. Remind people that you voted this guy who you thought was anti-war, and he just turned the blind eye on you. He just steamrolled over you so that Israel can buy out his campaign. This guy is a bitch boy for Bibi Netanyahu. This guy is a bitch boy for the Mossad, for the Zionist project that wants to advance warfare, that wants to do more bloodshed, that wants to slaughter more people. And now, with Donald Trump threatening Iran, guess who's backing Iran? Russia. So the guy that's supposed to be preventing World War III, if he's threatening to attack Iran, and if they follow through with this, Russia's not going to be happy. And you threatening Iran is practically threatening Russia. And if you threaten Russia, along with all the other allies that are supportive of Russia, the Brinks Accord, so on and so forth, that's going to initialize World War III. So Trump is doing the bidding of a foreign country, a tiny little foreign colonization project, and putting your national security in jeopardy, threatening World War III, all because Miriam Adelson and the AIPAC lobby bought his campaign. He will hold Iran responsible and won't be nice about it. The U.S. has been backing military action against the Houthis in Yemen for many years now, dating back to the Saudi-led invasion of Yemen in 2015. So, we've already destroyed Yemen. Yemen's already been destroyed because we were helping the Saudis. We were helping the Saudi Arabian government destroy Yemen, starving them, killing their children, killing their mothers. In 2015. That was during the Barack Obama years that Trump advanced. Trump didn't stop it. Trump didn't do a phone call to stop that war. He just kept that going. And now we're doing the exact same thing, only Israel is backing it. So Saudi Arabia backed the first attack in Yemen that's caused utter devastation. That was a humanitarian disaster led by Saudi Arabia and the United States. Now we're doing it for our other ally, Israel. That invasion was predicted on the idea of reinstalling President Abd Rabba Mansour Hadi, who was a close ally of the Saudis. Hadi had resigned a few months before the invasion. The Saudi invasion resulted in a protracted war, leaving Saudis and their allies in much control of the historical southern Yemen, but the Houthis remained in the north, including Sana'a. The U.S. for years backed an on-again, off-again offensive attack on central Yemen, trying to push towards Sana'a, but they ultimately never happened. The Houthis became a bigger deal internationally after the Israeli war in the Gaza Strip. The Houthis made a policy of attacking Israeli-linked vessels passing their area and picked that up to include many commercial vessels, leading major shipping companies to avoid the area. Under President Biden, the U.S., Israel, and UK launched airstrikes on the Houthis multiple times though it did not result in any halt of the strikes on ships. The Houthis did, however, briefly stop attacks when the Israeli-Gaza ceasefire was announced. So, the Houthis, that they want to manufacture consent, they want to fear-monger you with as being this detrimentous terrorist group that's just slaughtering people left, right, and center, they were protecting the Palestinians. They were protecting the people within Gaza. Because once the killing and pillaging and ethnic cleansing of Gaza was put to a halt with the ceasefire, the Houthis stopped also. Meaning that the Houthis were actually protecting Palestine. So if America wanted to stop the attacks by the Houthis and really wanted to stop this warfare, they would stop aiding for a genocide. That's all this takes. Once you stop the complete mass slaughter of Palestinians, the Houthis are going to go away. But because Israel wants to continue this genocide, wants to continue the ethnic cleansing, wants to purge all Palestinians and more Arab countries around to further their advances, that's why the Houthis in Iran and other countries are backing the Gazans and attacking Israeli ships. Although they have resumed attacks on Israelis in recent weeks because Israel is blocking humanitarian aid from entering the Gaza Strip. So the Houthis are protecting Gaza. They're not doing this to purge on Jewish people. They're not doing this because they're Islamic terrorists, as they want to tell you on Fox News. It's because they're assisting in protecting Palestinians that are being mass murdered, the innocent lives that are being slaughtered in mass droves by Israel. And now, because of that, Trump gave Israel the green light to restart large-scale bombing in Gaza. The U.S. is backing Israel's escalation by blaming the slaughter of Palestinians on Hamas. So there was a temporary ceasefire to get the hostages back, that they were going to do 3 different phases. They started off with the first phase, but we knew in the back of our mind, Bibi Netanyahu was not going to allow for it to continue on. Because Benjamin Netanyahu doesn't actually care about the hostages. Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli government are using the hostages and abusing them for leverage to continue on the genocide. Because if they actually got the hostages back safe and sound and people were safe, there would be no need for attacking Palestine. There would be no need for it. But now they can say that, oh, well, Hamas is not bringing back the hostages, so yeah, we got to continue on the genocide. Even Benjamin Netanyahu said this back in January, at the start of the said ceasefire. So it goes on to say, according to a report from the Wall Street Journal, President Donald Trump gave Israel the green light to restart its genocidal war on Gaza by launching massive airstrikes on the besieged territory, which killed at least 404 Palestinians, including scores of women and children, on Tuesday morning. Women and children, 404 Palestinian innocent civilians. And for all the Zionist maniacs that I still see running around on social media, going on to shows and saying, well, we gotta do it to stop Hamas. We gotta do what we can. And some of these Palestinians, we don't know if they're terrorists, so it's better to be safe than sorry. We just gotta massacre everybody. Think of how insane and insidious that is. That'd be like saying that, hey, we've now identified a potential child predator in your neighborhood. So instead of actually dealing with the individual at hand, We're going to drop a bomb and eliminate an entire neighborhood. Think of how crazy that is. Think of how crazy that is. That in order to stop one individual, we got mass slaughter an entire population. And Zionists don't care. They will twist themselves into a pretzel to protect that, because that is what a cult does. That's what an infuriating, evil, satanic cult does. And that's what the Nazis did to the people of in Germany, to the Jewish population. How are they any different? How are they any different than what happened in Germany? How is this any different than the Holocaust happened in the 40s? How is this any different than the Ku Klux Klan? Honestly, a supremacist state mass slaughtering entire populations based on their race because they're fear-mongering people that they're all a bunch of animals, they're a bunch of terrorists, they're a bunch of sympathizers, and they're going to do destruction to their people. Which, by the way, also just to point out, to back the Israeli supremacist state, did you know you can't have a DNA test in Israel? I didn't even know this. I did not know this. But Israelis cannot perform a DNA test because they are worried, they're petrified that some of the Israeli citizens might find Middle Eastern Arab connections within the family histories, and they don't want that to happen. Again, how are they different than the Ku Klux Klan? How are they different than Nazi Germany? Just saying. The report, which cited an Israeli official, said Trump was given a heads up before Israel began launching the strikes. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt confirmed that Israel consulted with Trump before launching the bombing and repeated the president's threat that all hell would break loose. All because of a phone call. A phone call to just initialize this war. Hey, yeah, it's Bibi. We want to continue on this genocide, and you're going to be okay with it, okay? Here's a blank check. Shut the hell up. Just peddle our conspiracy. Goodbye. What happened to the phone calls that were supposed to end the wars? Remember he gave a phone call to Vladimir Putin? Remember there was supposed to be discussion about ending that war? What's happening with that? What's happening with that? Because now you attacking Iran is going to involve a war with Russia. In his nearly 2 months in office, President Trump has rushed military aid to Israel, approving over $12 billion in arms deals and sending 2,000-pound bombs. So, all that Doge money that you thought was going to go back to you, that they were going to save money for you, ha! It went to them. All those Doge cuts were absolutely useless. Where do you think they're going to get the money from this? They're going to cut your Social Security. They're going to cut your Medicare. They're going to fire a bunch of people. They're going to tell you that you're worthless and you have to support this cause. A thing that nobody voted for. A thing that nobody wanted to have happen. $12 billion more. They're adding $6 billion more to the Pentagon. Trump has also repeatedly called for the permanent expulsion of Palestinians from Gaza, emboldening the members of the Israeli government whose goal is ethnic cleansing. The U.S. strongly backed Israel at the UN Security Council on Tuesday, claiming the blame for the escalation lies solely with Hamas. The U.S. and Israel are justifying the escalation by pointing to Hamas's rejection of a U.S. proposal for a temporary ceasefire. No, Hamas was actually agreeing to this. Hamas actually agreed to the ceasefire. And people are immediately going to jump on and say, why are you defending Hamas? I'm not. I'm saying that there was a peace proposal, that there was supposed to be an exchange of hostages, both Israeli and Palestinian. There was supposed to be an exchange in 3 different phases, and Israel violated all of them. Why? Because Israel doesn't want to save the hostages. The minute that they saved the hostages, there is no reason for this genocide. There is no reason to attack Palestinians whatsoever. But they're going to keep this going. They're going to keep the hostages in the arms of Hamas and push further to keep this genocide afloat. That's why they broke the ceasefire. That's why we kind of knew in the back of our mind that while everybody was saying, thank God there might be a chance at peace, note that Benjamin Netanyahu, who was a deviant, sycophantic war criminal, that Jeffrey Sachs called him a son of a bitch, that Trump retweeted. Trump endorsed Jeffrey Sachs' message when he called Netanyahu a son of a bitch. And now, Donald Trump is his little puppet boy to keep this going. Hamas has maintained that it wanted the full implementation of the ceasefire deal reached in January, which would have led to an Israeli withdrawal, a permanent ceasefire, and the release of the remaining Israeli hostages in Gaza. Israel repeatedly violated the agreement, including by imposing a total blockade of aid and all other goods entering Gaza on March 2nd. U.S. Ambassador Dorothy Shea said Hamas had steadfastly refused every proposal and deadline they've been presented over the past few weeks. No, they didn't. Israel violated their terms. They even laughed. They joked about it back in January. They even joked about it. All the people that were boo-hooing, crying, oh, ceasefire. Oh, ceasefire. We can't have a ceasefire. You want those terrorists to win? We can't have a ceasefire. We knew that this was going to be violated. We knew that Israel was not going to keep to their terms. And that is why places like Iran sent their military to defend the Palestinians. Because they knew Israel is not meant for peace. We know that Israel is not going to put a ceasefire agreement on to save the Israeli people and the Palestinians. They threaten their own people, for God's sakes. Including a bridge proposal to extend the ceasefire beyond Ramadan and Passover to allow time to negotiate a framework for a permanent ceasefire. The U.S. and Israel are now demanding that Israel release all the hostages and threatening that the bombing will escalate. Hamas must understand that the rules of the game have changed. If it does not immediately release all the hostages, the gates of hell will open. And if it faces the full force of the IDF by air, sea, and land until its complete destruction, said Israel Defense Minister Israel Kitz. So that's why they will not ever return all the hostages. And notice, again, the whole purpose of the ceasefire and the exchange is because there's a numerous amount of Palestinian hostages within the Israeli prisons. Huge amounts, way before October 7th, that they were trying to rescue, that they were trying to get out. They were trying to do an exchange. And because Israel failed to comply with that, that is why Hamas is delaying sending back their hostages, because they know that Israel is not to be trusted. And rightfully so. Rightfully so. That's not to support Hamas. You know who supports Hamas? Benjamin Netanyahu. The guy who sends suitcases of money to these guys. Why? Because he needed an excuse to annihilate Palestine, to annihilate Gaza and the West Bank. So here's Shadow of Ezra. There's Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, confirms that Israel warned the Trump administration in advance of tonight's airstrikes on Gaza. She declares that Hamas, the Houthis, and Iran will face consequences for threatening Israel's security. Leavitt reaffirms unwavering U.S. support for Israel, vowing to stand with its law-abiding people and uphold the alliance. You mean help the law-abiding people like Benjamin Netanyahu, who's been involved with all the Middle Eastern wars that the United States has been complicit with. You know, Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, that we overthrew their government and put in a terrorist as their leader. And notice how the press secretary of the United States doesn't mention a word about the American people. Because, you don't matter at this point. We got into office, Israel bought us, we're serving Israel, and you guys are suckers. That's what is happening here, folks. The Trump administration that screamed the loudest about MAGA, make America great again, make America healthy again, just screwed over its own people to serve its overlords of Israel. And here's the proof of it.
Well, the Trump administration and the White House were consulted by the Israelis on their attacks in Gaza tonight. And as President Trump has made it clear, Hamas, the Houthis, Iran, all those who seek to terrorize not just Israel, but also the United States of America will see a price to pay. All hell will break loose.
I'm sorry. What part of Israel is in which state? Someone showed me on a map. Someone showed me a map of the United States and point to Israel. What state is it in? Is it Michigan? Florida? The Carolinas? Where? Israel's all the way over here. America's over here. Explain to me how a threat on them, a supposed threat on them, is a threat on the United States. Explain to me this. Because geographically, that's the dumbest argument I've ever heard. Oh, a threat over there means a threat over here because we're allies. Mean that Israel has blackmail on us, and that's why we're complicit to do this.
And all of the terrorists in the Middle East, again, the Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas, Iranian-backed terror proxies, and Iran themselves should take President Trump very seriously when he says he is not afraid to stand for law-abiding people. He is not afraid to stand up for the United States of America and our friend and our ally Israel. And we know that these successful defensive strikes that took place over the weekend against the Houthis in the Red Sea were indeed successful. We took out some of their leaders, and the Defense Department is set to continue with this campaign if the Houthis continue with their retaliatory measures. The president is going to stand for the navigation, freedom of navigation of our seas, which is a very basic principle that unfortunately the previous administration refused to stand for, and that's why we are in this mess in the Middle East in the first place. President Trump inherited a lot of problems, Sean, because of the incompetence and the weakness of the Biden-Harris administration, but he is focused on fixing them, and our allies and our adversaries better take him seriously.
In other words, America! Fuck yeah! That's what I'm hearing. Hey, we have every right to go through this passage. We want to send our ships through there. We want to occupy control. We want to take over the Middle East. We have 900 military bases worldwide, damn it. We have every right to exploit this world. And you defending the Palestinians as somehow attacking us. Again, a guy who was supposed to end the wars, doesn't want to see dead bodies, pledges to not have World War III, is now advancing World War III. This is who you voted for, folks. Things don't really change from administration to administration. And right now, Trump is advancing, warfare with Iran, threatening to doing bombing in Yemen again, pledging his allegiance to restart the complete onslaught genocide in Gaza and Palestine. And all around the world, it seems like all around the world, some country is pledging for war. Because while that's going on in the United States, our country in Canada is not only supporting of this, but also supporting Ukraine. They're pledging more support to restart the Ukraine war. Same with the European nations. Why? Because NATO has got us by the balls. Israel's gotten Trump by the balls. NATO's gotten us by the balls. So, peace is unfortunately not going to exist. Sadly. We have little glimpses here and there. We have this kind of, it was almost like a miracle that Trump was saying those words when he was campaigning. But look who Congress is bought by. Look who runs the entire world. Look at the globalist structure and why these wars exist. As Julian Assange reminds us, these wars are meant to be continuous. That's why they have to create terrorist groups. That's why they have to fund them. And then we have to fight that creation so we can occupy territory, steal their resources, install a dictator, and screw over people. That's why we have this going on constantly, over and over and over and over again. And this is possibly why Donald Trump was allowed to become the president. A guy they tried to assassinate twice. That was the head scratcher that I was contemplating with. That a guy they were trying to assassinate twice did every single tactic to try to prevent him from being elected. Just won the election. And they're allowing him to be inaugurated. There's got to be something. There's got to be something. Well, this is it. Because Trump's not backing down on advancing warfare. So this does well for Israel. This does well for the military-industrial complex. And all this does is throw you under the bus even more. So that now your kids, hey, guess what? Now your kids can go fight in this war. You know how like 20 years ago, probably their parents fought in Afghanistan or fought in Iraq or fought in any other wars that the United States has been done for over 50 years. Probably even longer, actually, but for what we know, because of this. And here's even something more amazing. This is back in 2013. This is when Donald Trump was poking at Barack Obama. Remember that I predicted a long time ago that President Obama will attack Iran because of his inability to negotiate properly, not skilled. Well, look who's calling the pot. Look who's calling the pot and kettle black. Look who now is the puppet. All the times that he was poking at Barack Obama or Marco Rubio, who's now a Secretary of State. Remember when he said Marco Rubio was potentially being bought by Israel and he's going to morph into their little puppet? That was the puppet, Donnie. Who's the puppet now? Because you're advancing warfare on behest of them. You're advancing warfare on the behest of a foreign country that's completely bought you out. How America first that is. How America first that we're advancing warfare on the behest for another country while subsequently threatening to deport American citizens, threatening to deport legal residents because of their speech. How uniquely American that we're violating our constitutional rights and amendment rights of free speech to defend a foreign country. And that foreign country happens to be Israel. If it was any other foreign country, we'd be in panic, we'd be in lockstep. Oh my God, can you imagine if it was Russia? Can you imagine if Russia had some sort of lobby firm that was buying out politicians? Oh my God, how crazy would that be? The news media wouldn't stop talking about it. But because it's Israel, oh, we can't discuss it because it's anti-Semitic.